Welcome to this 1-hour English lesson. Today, you're going to learn English with the news. We're going to read 2 different news articles together so you can learn a lot of advanced vocabulary, complex grammar, and correct pronunciation. Let's get started.
Welcome to our article. Let me read the headline. Trump team finds 2 documents with classified markings in a Florida storage unit. Just to make sure everyone knows what this is, because we'll be talking about it a lot. Classified, this is information considered secret. So secret information. Now, this is most commonly used with the government, but you can use it with anyone, really. Let's say you call a doctor's office and try to ask information about someone else. They'll tell you, oh, sorry, that's classified information. They can't give you personal information about someone else. It's considered secret. So we can use this in other places aside from government. 2 documents with classified markings were found in a Florida storage unit during a search by a team hired by former President Donald Trump's lawyers. A person familiar with the situation told CNN. Okay, so again, classified, this is being used as an adjective, is describing what type of markings. Markings are just anything on it. So it could be a scribble, it could be an X, it could be a check mark, it could be something circled. All of those were markings. But if it's classified, you can't see this. So sorry, that's classified. You can't see it. It's secret. A storage unit is a small unit that people use to keep information or anything, not just information, that they can keep objects. So let's say you live in a small apartment or even a giant house. You might want to get a storage unit to keep old furniture that you no longer want in your house or any objects. You can put that in a storage unit. What else here? Okay, a person familiar with the situation told CNN. Now, they're giving you these details because the source of the information is classified. They don't want to reveal the actual person, probably because that person might get in trouble if they identify their name. So you see this a lot in the media where they don't tell you someone's name specifically. Now notice here we have CNN. I'm sure you know what this is. It's one of the biggest media networks in North America, at least. But I want you to notice that there is no article, okay? But you're probably familiar with the BBC. BC. Now, in this case, the article is part of the name. So sometimes we have proper names, and the general rule is that proper names don't have articles. Okay, but sometimes for companies, the article is part of the name. So the name of the company isn't just BBC, it's the BBC. But we're not using an article with CNN because CNN is a proper noun, which just means it's a name. It's the company name, but the name does not include an article. So you could say, I saw that, or maybe I read that. I read that on CNN. You don't have to say the CNN because that isn't part of their name. Just like you would say, I watched that on Netflix, right? That's the name. It's not the Netflix. I watched that on the Netflix. No, because that's not the name. It's just Netflix. I watched that on Netflix. But notice with BBC, you would say, I read that on the BBC, because the article the is part of the name. So I'm sharing that just because I know a lot of students are very familiar with the BBC. So I don't want you to be confused about why there isn't a article here with CNN. Let's continue on. Those documents were handed over to the FBI. Okay, to hand something over, this is when you officially give something to someone, but usually because it was requested. So hand over, I'm just giving it to you. But we use this a lot in a legal concept. In this case, a government concept because they have legal authority, right? But in a legal setting, you might be required to hand over documents to the lawyer by someone. Maybe the judge is requiring you to hand over the documents. So it simply means give the documents, but when we use hand over, it sounds more like an official or formal request. So that's what I would say. And this is a phrasal verb because we have the verb and the preposition. To hand something over, this is to an official request to give something to someone. Okay? So, for example, you might say, we're required to hand over these receipts to the auditor. So an auditor is someone who investigates your tax information, your reporting information, your financial information for a person or for a company. So you might have specific business receipts that you claimed were an expense and you were required to hand them over. Okay, let's continue on. No other documents with classified markings were found during a search of 4 of Trump's properties, the source said. The source, again, this is commonly used to say that a person provided this information, but often people don't want to be known. You don't want to identify that John Smith shared this information because John Smith might be a friend of Trump or an employee of Trump, and he could get in trouble for sharing that information. So the source represents a person who does not want to be identified. You see this a lot in the media. So let's say somebody shared information with you and they gave you some advice and said, you don't have to file your taxes this year, okay? You might say, who's the source of that information? So you want to know where the information originated. Who's the source? Who's the source? You can just say that, or you can say, who's the source of this information, and then you can identify the information. So the source is the person, the source, person. Well, it doesn't have to be a person. It could come from a website, for example. So where the information originated, where it came from. Let's continue on. The discovery of the documents was first reported by the Washington Post. Now, I want to point this out as a grammar issue because here we have the documents. That's plural, right? So think of your subject. I, you, he, she, it, we, they. You always want to come back to those core subjects to identify the conjugation of your verb. Because what verb is this? Was. What verb is this? Well, of course, it's the verb to be in the past simple, right? So this is to be past simple. Now, there are two options for the verb to be in the past simple. You have was or were. Now we use was, I, he, she, it, was, but you were, we were, they were. Now we have the documents. So that would be what subject? I, you, he, she, it, we, they. The documents is they. So if the subject, the documents, this represents they, then why do we have was and not were? Because we need were, right? It's because the documents is not the subject that's being conjugated. This is even a mistake that some native speakers make. They take the noun directly beside the verb and assume that's the subject. It's not. It's this, the discovery. The discovery is our subject of the sentence. And this is an it. It was. The discovery was first reported by the Washington Post. So that's our subject, and that's why it's conjugated with was. This information of the documents, that's just additional information to tell you more about the discovery. But our subject is the discovery. So this is our subject, and it's it. It was. Don't let that confuse you when you're deciding what your subject is, deciding what your verb conjugation is. Always think about the subject. Now notice here, the Washington Post, and notice the is in uppercase. It's in uppercase, capital, because we capitalize proper names. Now, the is part of the name, and that's why it's capitalized. But remember, CNN, the source of this article doesn't use the article the CNN. It's just CNN. Let's continue on. The team of two searched Trump Tower in New York, the Bedminster Golf Club, an office location in Florida, and the storage unit where the two documents were found and where the General Services Administration had shipped Trump's belongings after he left the White House. Okay, so all of this additional information tells you more about the storage unit. It relates directly to the storage unit. The storage unit is where the two documents were found. Remember, the two documents with that classified secret information. And it's also where the General Services Administration, which I assume is a government department, had shipped Trump's belongings. Now, belongings are anything that belong to you. That is where the word belongings come from. Okay, so to belong is a verb. This is a good grammar point and a vocabulary point. So to belong, this is a verb. Now, belongings, this is a noun. And we generally use it with one's belongings. So it's my belongings, your belongings, his belongings, Trump's belongings. So we could say Trump's belongings were shipped to his storage locker or unit. To to say that sentence in a different way, but to maintain the meaning. Now, a belonging could be anything that belongs to you. It could be as simple as a pen. It's your cell phone. It's your clock. It's everything that belongs to me. Everything in this room right here is my belonging, including this microphone, my rings, my headband, everything, right? So those are your belongings. Now let's take a step back and let's take a look at our grammar as well. We have had shipped, had shipped. This is the past perfect. The past perfect, it confuses students, but it's a really useful verb tense because it tells you when things happened. And that's its only purpose. We have two actions that happened. So the two documents, that's how I would shorten documents. Two documents were found, okay? So found, and then documents shipped. These are our two actions. But interestingly, this action comes first in our story. So I might think, if I'm just reading this, I might think that this action happened first because it was told first in the article. But grammatically, I know that this action happened first because of the grammar, had shipped, okay? So the past perfect is the older action. So past perfect, action that, so a past action, because it's past perfect, past action that happens before another past action, okay? Now, action, the first action is the past perfect, and the second action, which is the newer action, is the past simple. Past simple. The documents were found. The documents had shipped. So do a little practice with the past perfect. It's a very useful verb tense, and it doesn't need to be confusing. Let's continue on. The forced searches came amid lingering concerns from the Justice Department that not all documents had been returned to the federal government. Carried out in recent weeks, the searches were overseen by Trump's legal team, another source familiar with the matter told CNN. Okay, let's take a look at this. Very useful. This is a preposition, and it means in the middle of. In the middle of. So the four searches came in the middle of these concerns. So you have these concerns, and in the middle of them, amid the concerns, they started searching. They completed the searches. So I'll give you another example in a political context. You might say, this scandal happened amid the election. Now, the election takes place over a period of time. You have a beginning and an end of the election. So the election is going, and then a scandal happens. Now, the scandal happens amid the election. So in the middle of, it doesn't necessarily have to be the very middle. It could be closer to the beginning or closer to the end. It's just another way of saying during. Now let's move on to the word right beside it, because you're probably wondering about this, and that's lingering. So lingering is a verb, and in this case, it's being used as an adjective because it's giving more information about the concerns. What type of concerns? They're lingering concerns. To understand the adjective, you just need to know the meaning of the verb. So the verb is to linger. To linger. This is when something remains longer than wanted or expected. Wanted, needed, or expected. We use this verb a lot, so add it to your vocabulary. Let's say you have a cold, okay? So maybe you have a sore throat and a little bit of a stuffed up nose, a cough, and you expect that to last for 3 to 5 days, okay? That's how long you expect it to last. But 10 days later, 2 weeks later, you're still coughing. Then you can say, my cold is lingering, It's in the present continuous because it's taking place right now. It's lingering. Once it's done, you can say, my cold lingered for 2 weeks. My cold lingered for 2 weeks. We also use this with the weather a lot because you expect summer to be warm for a certain amount of time, or winter to be cold for a certain amount of time, or for rain to happen for a certain amount of time. And if it takes longer than expected, you can say, oh wow, the cold, in this case, the weather, the snow is lingering, the rain is lingering. Now we use this in more of a negative way, so I generally wouldn't say the sunshine is lingering because I want the sunshine to stay. But if you don't want the sunshine, then you can use lingering. So in this case, it's an adjective. It's saying the concerns stayed longer than expected. So the concerns from the Justice Department that not all documents had been returned, that stayed longer than they were expecting. So these are two great adjectives. Great vocabulary. One's a preposition, one's an adjective, and now you have the verb as well. Add it to your vocabulary. Let's continue on. Trump's attorney offered to let federal investigators observe the search at his Bedminster property, but that offer was declined. Given the Justice Department's response, Trump lawyers did not make a similar offer for the search of the other properties. Okay, given the Justice Department's response, this is a preposition and is very useful. Notice how here it starts the sentence, and the meaning is considering something. So the something is the Justice Department's response. So remember, they declined the past search. So when we consider how they responded in the past, we're not going to ask them again because they said no in the past. So why would they say no, yes now if they said no before? So given that response, considering it. Now, this is very useful expression. We use it a lot. You might say, given his age, I'm surprised he's running again. Okay. given his age. Trump is quite old, right? So I'm surprised he's running, in this case, running for office. This is when you want to be elected. You run for a position where you're elected. It's just the vocabulary we would use. It's not running, although it actually makes sense because somebody who's quite old, you also wouldn't expect them to start running. So you might say, given his age, I'm surprised he ran the marathon. So you use this in the sense, when I consider his age, knowing how old he is, I'm surprised. So very useful preposition to have in your speech. Let's continue on. It would be highly unusual for the Justice Department to observe searches that aren't conducted by law enforcement. The department declined to comment. Stephen Chang, a spokesman for Trump. Generally, we try to avoid gendered words now. Notice how I said spokesperson, because it's a little outdated to use spokesman, because in the past, they would use this for men and women. Fireman, firewoman, mailman, male women. But now we don't really say that. We just use person to try to be more gender neutral, more inclusive. So you can say that, but the more modern way to say it is spokesperson. Spokesperson for Trump said the former president and his counsel continue to be cooperative and transparent. Okay, transparent. This is when you freely share information with others. So this is an adjective that is used a lot, especially in positions of authority or power within your company. You might complain that your boss isn't very transparent, which means they don't share a lot of information with you. So to freely share information. And you can use this in a positive. My boss is very transparent, which is generally a positive because they share information freely. Or you can use it in a negative. My boss isn't very transparent, which is more of a negative. They're not sharing information with you, which can make it difficult for you to do your job or make decisions. So that's a good adjective there. It is unclear what the subsequent contact between the Trump legal team and federal investigators has been since the searches. So subsequent, this means happening after. Okay, so they had searches in the past. So search 1 happened 3 months ago. Search 2 happened 2 weeks ago. So you could say they had search 1 and then subsequently they had search 2. So subsequent is when something happens after something. So subsequent happens after. Now, we use this as an adverb quite a lot. You could say, I got a promotion and subsequently bought my dream house. So you did this action after this action. And when you use subsequently, it implies the relationship between the two. You were able to do this because of this one. So it also shows a relationship. So notice this is being used as an adverb. Let's complete the article. CNN previously reported exclusively that Trump's legal team was considering allowing federal agents to search Mar-a-Lago again to satisfy justice demands that all sensitive government documents were returned. The matter was addressed in a court proceeding this fall. where the Justice Department asked a judge to issue an order compelling the Trump team to arrange for another search. Let's look at this here. Order compelling the Trump team. This is another way of saying forcing. So they're trying to force the team to arrange another search. They're saying you must arrange another search. So this is a verb to compel. To compel. And this is to force someone to do something. So this probably happens a lot in the workplace. You might say, my company compelled us to work in the office. So a lot of people are transitioning from working from home to working in the office. But when you use the verb compel, it sounds like they're not asking. They're not saying, hey, do you want to work in the office? Do you want to stay at home? They're compelling. They're forcing. You must work in the office. So this is a very useful verb. All right, so that's our article. Now let me go back and I'll read it from start to finish so you can pay attention to my pronunciation. Trump team finds 2 documents with classified markings in a Florida storage unit. 2 documents with classified markings were found in a Florida storage unit during a search by a team hired by former President Donald Trump's lawyers, a person familiar with the situation told CNN. Those documents were handed over to the FBI. No other documents with classified markings were found during a search of 4 of Trump's properties, the source said. The discovery of the documents was first reported by the Washington Post. The team of 2 searched Trump Tower in New York, the Bedminster Golf Club, an office location in Florida, and the storage unit where the 2 documents were found and where the General Services Administration had shipped Trump's belongings after he left the White House. The 4 searches came amid lingering concerns from the Justice Department that not all documents had been returned to the federal government. Carried out in recent weeks, the searches were overseen by Trump's legal team, another source familiar with the matter told CNN. Trump's attorneys offered to let federal investigators observe the search at his Bedminster property, but that offer was declined. Given the Justice Department's response, Trump lawyers did not make a similar offer for the search of the other properties. It would be highly unusual for the Justice Department to observe searches that aren't conducted by law enforcement. The department declined to comment. Stephen Chang, a spokesman for Trump, said the former president and his counsel continued to be cooperative and transparent. It is unclear what the subsequent contract between the Trump legal team and federal investigators has been since the searches. CNN previously reported exclusively that Trump's legal team was considering allowing federal agents to search Mar-a-Lago again to satisfy justice demands that all sensitive government documents were returned. The matter was addressed in a court proceeding this fall where the Justice Department asked a judge to issue an order compelling the Trump team to arrange for another search.
Amazing job with that article. Now we're going to move on to the next article. Feel free to take a pause, get a cup of tea if you like, and let's continue on.
Welcome to our article where we're talking about Ivanka Trump. Let me read the headline. Ivanka Trump throws brothers and father under bus in New York fraud suit. All right, so a fraud suit, this is short form for a lawsuit. A lawsuit is when someone officially accuses you of something and then you must appear in court and defend yourself. Notice the pronunciation. I hear a lot of mistakes. Suit. Oot. Ignore this spelling here. Imagine it's more of a oo sound. Oot, oot, oot. Lawsuit, lawsuit. Fraud. Now, a fraud lawsuit. Fraud is the legal term of when you deceive someone. Deceive in the sense of lying to someone, usually in order to obtain money. Fraud suit, fraud lawsuit. So Ivanka Trump throws brothers and father under bus. What does that mean? This is a really great idiom. Let me highlight the words of the idiom here. To throw someone under the bus. Under the bus. Let me write this out for you here. To throw someone under the bus. This is, as I said, an idiom. Notice that I added the article the. This is not optional. You must use the article the. You might be saying, but Jennifer, they don't use the article the in the headline. That's because in headlines, they commonly leave out unnecessary words, filler words, but they're grammatically required. So articles are commonly omitted in headlines, but you need this article in the idiom. To throw someone under the bus, this is when you harm someone in order to protect yourself. Now, when I say harm, I don't mean physically harm someone. You could harm their reputation. You could harm their career. You could harm their relationship. So let's say I asked you to tell my boss that I was at a dentist appointment, but in reality, I was shopping. I was doing something leisurely for myself. I was shopping. But then you throw me under the bus and you tell my boss that I'm shopping and not actually at the dentist. Now, maybe you protect yourself because you're not lying to your boss and your boss will see you as someone who is trustworthy. So that is good. But at the same time, you're harming me because you're voluntarily telling my boss that I'm shopping instead of at the dentist. So that would be you threw me under the bus because you throw someone under the bus. So Ivanka is throwing her family, her brothers and her father, under the bus. So she's harming them in some way in order to protect herself. So let's find out how now that you understand the vocabulary. We'll continue on. Ivanka Trump, the eldest daughter of former President Donald Trump. Eldest, most students know what this means, but this means oldest. Oldest daughter of former President Donald Trump has asked for a delay in bringing the $250 million fraud lawsuit. Notice here, they're saying lawsuit instead of just suit. They're exactly the same thing. But this man is also wearing a suit. The spelling and pronunciation is exactly the same. He is wearing a suit. Okay, so it's context that will help you identify if we're talking about clothing or about a formal legal process. The context will make it obvious. Fraud lawsuit filed against her brothers, her father, and their family's real estate company. Okay, we'll pause there for a second. So we talked about lawsuit, suit, that pronunciation, suit. We know what fraud is. A delay. This is when something is scheduled, but it takes longer than wanted or longer than the official scheduled time. I'm sure most students know this from the airport because you will hear the announcement, I'm sorry, but flight 234 destination Los Angeles is delayed. Your flight is delayed. So we commonly use this as an adjective with the verb to be, is delayed. You can use this with a person. I was delayed in traffic. So if your boss asks you, where were you? Oh, sorry, I was delayed in traffic. So it took me longer than needed, wanted, required. In this case, a flight is something that runs on a schedule. Now, maybe you don't have an actual schedule for the amount of time you spend in traffic, but you do have an estimate. It should take me 15 minutes to get to work. Today, it took me 30 minutes. It took me longer than needed, wanted, necessary, so I was delayed. Notice my verb to be in the past simple. So she's asking for a delay. She's asking to receive additional time to complete something. And in this case, what she wants to complete is her legal argument, her legal case to protect herself from this fraud lawsuit. Before we go on, I want you to know you can get the free lesson PDF that summarizes everything you're learning in this lesson. So look in the description for the link to the free lesson PDF. Now let's continue on. So the delay about bringing this lawsuit to trial. Now, why does she want a delay? Because a defense arguing that she wasn't responsible for fraudulent financial statements issued by the company will take more time to prepare. So why do you want more time? Because it will take more time to prepare. It's a pretty simplistic reason for wanting a delay. We need more time. But that is the reason why it will take more time. Let's talk about fraudulent because we talked about the word fraud, which is a noun. Fraudulent, fraudulent, fraudulent. This is an adjective. So it has the same meaning, but it's just describing something. So it's saying that the financial statements are fraudulent, which means they are not accurate. They are deceptive. There's something in them that isn't accurate. So maybe the company was claiming that this property is worth $1 million because we're talking about a real estate issue, right? So let's say I told you this house, this property is worth $1 million, but then it turns out that's fraudulent when in reality it was only worth $750,000. So I received more money. That would be fraudulent. That would be me committing fraud. You could file a fraud lawsuit against me. Okay, let's continue on. In court documents, Ms. Trump's attorneys argue that the fraud complaint filed last year against her and her co-defendants by New York Attorney General Letitia James does not contain a single allegation that Ms. Trump directly or indirectly created, prepared, reviewed, or certified any of her father's financial statements. Okay, so we already know about the fraud. The complaint, this is just another way of saying lawsuit, is more of a legal term. So you don't really need this for your everyday vocabulary unless you're a lawyer. We use the word complaint in an everyday context though, and it's very common. Do you have any complaints? Do you have any complaints? And this is when you are not satisfied with a service or a product or something, and you can raise your dissatisfaction. I wrote the definition here. And in fact, many departments, many large organizations will have a complaint department, an area of the company that their only job is to deal with customer complaints. So you could email in your complaint, call in, text in, other ways you can raise a complaint. In this case, it means lawsuit. The fraud lawsuit filed last year against her and her co-defendants, okay, does not contain a single allegation. Allegation is also a legal term. We do see this a lot in the media. Allegation, this is a statement, and it's made but without proof, so there's no proof at all that someone has done something wrong or illegal. So for example, there were allegations, so there were statements that the CEO committed fraud. So maybe I just wrote a letter. Who writes letters anymore? Maybe I sent an email to a journalist and said that the CEO committed fraud. Right there, I just made an allegation against the CEO because I gave a statement, but there was no proof. I just said it, right? But they're saying that this lawsuit, the complaint, does not contain any allegations. This is one, right? So this is a way of emphasizing zero. So a single, this means one. But if you say it does not contain a single, it's just emphasizing that there are zero. Allegation. So there are no statements that Ivanka Trump, Mrs. Trump, did anything wrong, basically. Let's continue on. The judge overseeing the fraud lawsuit. When you oversee something, you are responsible for that something. So it's another way of saying responsible for, because you're responsible for something. Now, it can also mean in charge of, which is exactly the same thing. It's just another common way of saying it. Let me write an example down here. I could ask, who's overseeing the conference? So who's in charge of the conference? Who's responsible for the conference? Or she oversaw the interview process. So there was an interview process. Your company hired someone. Notice this is in the past simple. She oversaw the interview process. My verb is see, and then I just add over. Oversaw. She oversaw the interview process. She was responsible for. She was in charge of. So now you have three synonyms, but notice the different grammatical structures. Responsible for, in charge of, and then simply oversee something. The judge overseeing the fraud lawsuit has said the 2 October trial. This might be a British way of writing dates, or perhaps it's a legal way of writing dates, because commonly in American English, when we write dates, we write the month and then we write the day, and then you could write the year if you have it. So I would say the October 2nd trial, the trial on October 2nd, said the October 2nd trial. To me, it sounds weird to say the 2 October. I don't know. Perhaps it's a legal term. The October 2nd trial will commence. This is a formal way of saying start. I don't encourage you to say the movie will commence at 8 o'clock because it sounds too formal. You can use commence in a legal setting or a very academic setting, but in an everyday speech, including in professional situations like a job interview, a meeting, a conference, use start. Don't use commence. We'll start on time. Oh, we'll start on time. I was expecting them to say a specific date, but on time. So if something starts on time, it wasn't delayed, right? So it will start on time, come hell or high water. This is an idiom. It's a informal idiom. I'm surprised that the judge said this, to be honest, because it's more of an informal idiom. It's not slang by any mean, but it's just informal. Informal. And it means despite circumstances. So the judge is saying that I don't care if Ivanka needs more time. That's a circumstance. The trial will start on time. So you can just add come hell or high water to say despite any circumstances. You might say, I'm going to get that promotion come hell or high water, which means you're going to do everything in your power. It sounds very strong. Or I'm going to become a confident speaker come hell or high water. So even if there are circumstances like it's very difficult, it takes time, it costs money because you have to invest in training, you're still going to do it come hell or high water. All right, let's continue on. But Ms. Trump's request for delay cites the unique circumstances of her role in the case and notes that she has not been accused of lying about her father's finances. So we know that she has not been accused because there was not a single allegation. If there was an allegation, it means that someone accused her. So we actually already know this, has not been accused of lying about her father's finances despite her former role as a top executive at the Trump organization. All right, let's continue on. Her lawyers also said the case is not simple because she resigned from her role. When you resign from your role, this is a formal way of saying quit. And when you resign, when you quit, it means the exact same thing. And it's when you voluntarily leave your position, but it's also permanent. So you're not just leaving for 2 weeks, 2 months, which would be temporary. You're leaving permanently. So when you voluntarily leave your position, and I'm going to add permanently. So she resigned from her role at the company in 2017, which means in 2017, she stopped working for the company. And why did she resign? Well, because she wanted to take a position in her father's administration when he was president. Okay, let's continue on. Ms. Trump's father, Donald Trump, obviously, has also asked for a delay. So Donald Trump also wants more time, surprise, surprise, in the trial and argued that a later start date is born of necessity. This is just a way of saying necessary. Necessary. It's more of an idiom to say necessary. It's not that common. I would probably just say a later start date is necessary, in part due to the staggering volume against the company. I really like this adjective here. Staggering means shocking and surprising, and this is an adjective. So let me share an example most people can relate to. Because of the staggering price of gas staggering price of gas. Many people are traveling less. Staggering price of gas. So that is our adjective. It describes the price of gas. We commonly use this in a verb to be statement. So you could just say as a statement, the price of gas is staggering, staggering. So our verb to be, and then our adjective, staggering. Now you could put this in the past simple and say was staggering last year, for example. So remember to conjugate your verb to be. So that's a nice advanced adjective to add to your vocabulary. Let's continue on. Defendants have had ample time and opportunity. I really like this adjective, ample. Ample means more than enough. More than enough. I want to compare this to an adjective you're probably familiar with, which is sufficient. Sufficient simply means enough. So if I say you've had sufficient time to complete the assignment, that simply means enough. But if I say you've had ample time, it means you've had more than enough time. So if you ask your boss for a delay, an extension, which it's commonly called in the workplace, an extension, in this context, it's a delay, your boss could say you've had ample time, more than enough time. So there's probably some annoyance in that if you're asking for an extension, a delay, and you've had ample time. Ample time and opportunity to familiarize themselves with the matter. Familiarize yourself with something is just when you become familiar with it, so you understand it at a deeper level. Instead, they've waited until the eve of the fact discovery deadline to only just begin their process of conducting discovery. Discovery is a legal term. It describes when you gather all your documents, you interview people, you request information. All of that is done during discovery. So don't worry about this. It's a legal term. I learned this from watching legal shows like Suits, for example. Instead, they waited until the eve of the discovery deadline. The eve of, this is the night before. The night before. Let me give you an example. Many brides are nervous the eve of their weddings. And this is the night before their wedding. Okay, so we use this eve of, we really reserve it for more very special dates or very important dates. So a discovery deadline, we could consider this a very important date, a wedding, an anniversary, a holiday. We could consider that a special date. And then it's more common to use the eve of. In everyday contexts, it would be more common to use the night before. For example, call me the night before you go on vacation. Now, I could say, call me the eve of your vacation, but my friend would probably be a little confused. Why are you talking like that, Jennifer? Because it's just a more regular event. Assuming this is a regular vacation. Perhaps if it's a once in a lifetime or it's your honeymoon, but we have a specific term for the vacation you take after you get married, we call that your honeymoon. So maybe in those specific cases, I would say the eve of, but it sounds more natural in an everyday context to say the night before. The eve of the fact discovery deadline, to only just begin their process of conducting discovery to prepare for trial. All right. And now seek more time. Seek, this is a verb. This is a more formal verb. And when you seek something, you try to get it. You try to get it. So I'm seeking a job. I'm trying to get a job. They're seeking more time. They're trying to get more time. And now seek more time. So it's more of a formal verb. The Attorney General's office said. And that is the end of our article. A lot of really advanced vocabulary. I would say don't worry too much about the legal vocabulary unless you're a lawyer. And instead, just focus on the everyday vocabulary that I taught you in the lesson. So now what I'll do is I'll read the article from start to finish, and you can focus on my pronunciation. Ivanka Trump throws brother and father under bus in New York fraud suit. Ivanka Trump, the eldest daughter of former President Donald Trump, has asked for a delay in bringing the $250 million fraud lawsuit filed against her, her brothers, her father, and their family's real estate company to trial because a defense arguing that she wasn't responsible for fraudulent financial statements issued by the company will take more time to prepare. In court documents, Ms. Trump's attorneys argue that the fraud complaint filed last year against her and her co-defendants by New York Attorney General Letitia James does not contain a single allegation that Ms. Trump directly or indirectly created, prepared, reviewed, or certified any of her father's financial statements. The judge overseeing the fraud lawsuit has said the 2 October trial will commence on time come hell or high water. But Ms. Trump's request for delay cites the unique circumstances of her role in the case and notes that she has not been accused of lying about her father's finances despite her former role as a top executive at the Trump Organization. Her lawyers also said the case is not simple because she resigned from her role at the company in 2017 to take a position in her father's administration. Ms. Trump's father has also asked for a delay in the trial and argued that a later start date is born of necessity, in part due to the staggering volume against the company. Defendants have had ample time and opportunity to familiarize themselves with the matter. Instead, they have waited until the eve of the fact discovery deadline to only just begin the process of conducting discovery to prepare for trial, and now seek more time, the Attorney General's office said.
Amazing job with this lesson. If you're up for it, I have another lesson right here that I know you're going to love. And make sure you get your free speaking guide where I share 6 tips on how to speak English fluently and confidently. You can get it from my website right here. And when you're ready, get started with your next lesson.